Hello guys, I hope everyone is enjoying your evenings and your early afternoons. So I'm really happy to be here today at Primary in Artshead Gallery in Nottingham. My name is Jade Foster and I'm a curator, but I'm currently sort of studying and doing art history. And I used to work at Primary, and I've curated a wonderful exhibition with an incredible artist, working with them over a course of, I think, over 2 years, something like that. And I've really enjoyed what we've produced together and we've created, Attention Absorption by Maybelle Peters. So we're all here to celebrate Maybelle, but also to celebrate the amazing thing that happens when Black people come together and celebrate each other, support each other, you know. And I think there's rare occasions where we get opportunities to share space and to connect and converse and to see how our practices are related but also different, and the different specificities that we bring to the field of visual art or animation or anything artistic really. So I think this is an opportunity to think about those divergences and convergences and how our practices interlink but also are different and unique, and really build on those conversations together. So I just want to sort of just make sure everyone knows who's in the room. So we've got Jessica.
Hi.
We have Mothy, Phoebe and Maybelle. So we're going to, in terms of what we're going to do, we're going to do a couple of presentations and then we're going to have an open discussion and dialogue together, reflecting on the practices and sort of bringing questions to sort of feed off each other and what we've kind of been saying in the presentations. So I'll give it up to Jessica.
Hello, hi. Hi, my name's Jessica Ashman. I'm a multidisciplinary artist based in London, and I work with animation, installation, and music performance, and I perform under the name Spirit's Eye. And yeah, I've been practicing for a while, maybe like 10, 15 years. My background is commercial animation, and over the past 5, 6 years, I've been pivoting towards the visual arts landscape, and more sort of experimental modes of working. So yeah, that's me. Oh, sorry, this is my work. Yeah. That was just a short snippet of my most recent project called Daughter, which was an audio-visual performance and a 5-minute single-channel piece, which, is a sort of, well, it's an epic. An EP as well, which explores ideas of utopian planets for Black women and ideas of belonging inspired by a history of transracial adoption. So it's a good example of the type of work I do, where I'm interested in so much that expands through my practice, and I think it's a good sort of summary of the stuff I do.
Hi, I'm Maybelle Peters. So as Jade said, working on attention absorption has been a kind of long project, which has been interesting. But also it allows me to think more about what animation can bring in terms of exploring lived experiences. So I worked with, when we worked at Raleigh Audio Archive, and then listening to voices and thinking about how I can use animation to tell stories in a way that references labour in particular, and then racialised Black bodies. was key to me finding different methods. So my practice over the years has changed. I've always been interested in animation, but what I'm interested in now is thinking particularly what animation can bring to tell stories, and stories that are personal to me, but also stories that have been maybe sidelined or have been absent. So it's addressing absence as well. So what we're going to see is a clip from the solo exhibition. So I've drawn on the archive, as well as the archive from audio, I've drawn on my own personal archive. So the hands that I've used are hands that I've observed and recorded for about 20 odd years. And it's a way of also bringing in my personal story, but also referencing my labour when I trace those images. So this piece is called Traces of a Gestural Accent, and it's trying to think about how animation can be explored through sound but also through gesture.
Hi, I'm Mothy. So I'd say I'm kind of like a new artist, as in like I'm kind of still finding myself in my animation space, still exploring and experimenting. A lot of my work is personal, and it's try to draw on like how I feel about my blackness and what that means to me. And I feel like there's a lot of crossovers, and a lot of people do feel similar ways, but I'm never trying to speak for anyone else. It's more about how I feel about my hair, how I feel about my skin, and I'm kind of working through textures as well. So originally, like, I thought I wanted to do 2D animation, but now I'm like practicing with sculptures, and that's been really nice for me. Yeah, and this is like some of my work. So when I was working for uni, as you can see, I was kind of getting obsessed with like rigging hands, and I kind of was like really in that space. I thought I need to rig these hands; they're going to be like the best rigged hands ever. And then once I kind of like worked through that, I kind of realised I feel like I was trying to express my need to touch my work, or like feel like my work could be touched. Also, I'm non-binary, I identify as non-binary, I use they, them pronouns, so a lot of that does seep into my work as well. So I feel like I was working, a lot of the time I'm working through like intersectionality of both of those things and all of the other things. And yeah, that's kind of like where my practice is heading, but I don't have like a set space of where I'm going, but I hope it's good.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Boswell. I am an interdisciplinary artist. My work centres around drawing, but it encompasses animation, obviously, and film, video, sound, installation. I make these kind of immersive installations and interactivity, and most recently I'm writing a lot and using writing as an output rather than only as a research tool. So that's kind of new for me, performance. I'm interested in how we see each other, how we sense each other, how we sense ourselves, and how we care for each other. I work very much through a Black feminist and diasporic lens. Do you want some water? Yeah, so that's me.
Is Mothy, whose lives to demand the release of national there is no strong press. The Kenyan post-colonial contract is not an arrangement between allegedly neutral individuals, but rather a patriarchal and ethnicist order based on the domination of all Kenyan women by all Kenyan men. Muyobo wrote a poem the day after she participated in the demonstration last night. Where are flowing flag, fitting rhythms to the whole span of life? Just so.
Okay, so this is a piece called Mutumia. Mutumia in Kikuyu means woman, but some say it translates more directly as the one whose lips are sealed. It is a 360 looped animation that projects on all the walls of the gallery, and it is meant to be a salute to women who've used their bodies in protest when they're not permitted to use their voices. These are extracts. It's a 30-minute loop, and I made a call to arms for women to come to my studio and look through their body about what protest is, what it feels like, and what it looks like in the body. And so we looked through various things from grief and rage to kinship and sisterhood and resilience. And in the floor is a series of hidden senses, and each sense is linked to a soundtrack. I worked with a gospel choir and different Kenyan women writers and conversations with my mother and other women. And so if you stand in the space and you acknowledge the presence of these women in the often very white, very male-centered gallery, you enable their voices to be heard.
Can everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Hello. So, thank you all for sharing a bit about your practice. And I want to start with something of my own experience, because I was on a panel last week with incredible Black people talking about Black curatorial practice in the UK. And the one things that I heard was around this idea of just how sometimes having these frequent conversations, they take a toll on your body and they exert from you. But how can you be in a place of happily being resilient? Like, how can you be at peace with yourself when you're doing this work, when you're supporting people, when you're talking about your lived experience, when you're talking about what's at stake? when you're talking about how this work is so entangled with your own corporality, your own body, your own sense of being, and what's at stake when that work isn't cared for. So I just want to acknowledge the labour of going back to these frequent conversations about the lack of, the scarcity. And actually, I want this conversation to be a place of generosity, about actually what is plentiful, what is really present, what is actually a place, speaking from a place of happy resilience. So I just want to acknowledge that first, about this is not a panel discussion to talk about the lack of. This is a conversation about what is there, and acknowledging that, and acknowledging actually everything that is plentiful about Black culture production, everything that is so vital and warming about Black culture production. So I just wanted to frame that first. So I've actually got a question about, what do you feel animation is to you? Because I remember Phoebe, when we were having a conversation about you actually feeling a little bit of a dissonance with the field of animation, and actually maybe the way you frame your practice isn't as an animator, but as someone multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. So I want everyone to sort of think about your relationship to animation in the field, and maybe talk through that lens first.
Hello? Hello? It's stuck. Hello? Oh. Yeah, so I didn't come to animation, honestly, because I liked animation. I came to animation because time was playing such a massive part in my work, but my work was static. And so I just wanted to bring time in. I wanted to make my drawings move. So I studied I did the practical side of animation just so that I could learn how to move drawings. And then for a while I got into, because obviously when you go into a course, you get into the thing of film festivals, and your student film might do well, and so I got a little bit into kind of the working of animation and working in animation, and it was great in some respects. It was great to be able to earn money from drawing. That was nice at the time, but I always felt like, again, time, like life is really short to be working on, like, drawing someone's toe moving for too long, that wasn't your toe, or someone whose toe you adored, and so as soon as I could, I got a studio and started making my own work. And in that work, like, I've never really thought myself as anything. I didn't think myself a painter. I didn't think myself I just thought I want to tell stories the best way I can, and I want to communicate the best way I can. And so animation became a really important part of my toolkit. But I'm just interested in language, and it as another language that I use when it's called upon, but it's not something that I. So when I come back into spaces that are animation based, sometimes I do feel like, should I be here? Because I don't use it all the time, and especially when work becomes more rigorous and in terms of deadlines and timelines and commitments, there's just no time to sit and draw. Like that thing that you saw took 9 months, and I don't have 9 months anymore to spend on one work, which is a shame. But I love animation, so I'll never stop doing it fully.
Hello again. So I'd say, well, I've always kind of been like a busybody, like, oh, go, like, gotta go. So I felt like that when I was doing animation or when I was like making things move, I kind of felt like, yeah, that's my trajectory, like we're moving, we're going forwards, like that's what we're doing, like that's who I am. And then I'd say probably like in third year of uni, it was when, and I was doing this film and it was in lockdown and those times, where like I actually realised that when I was animating, it was kind of the only time I was still, and like the only time I was like, oh, I am hungry, or like, oh, I do need to stand up. So like it became like a real form of self-care and like real nice having time with myself, just creating this art. And like I know that sometimes like it's teams of people doing this sort of stuff, but I never really wanted to get there. I don't really want to get there. I just kind of want to like keep that form of self-care going. So like I feel like that's why I animate, because it's like, do you know what I mean, like 9 months on your own, just having like a breather, like in a moment, and like just to ground yourself. And like when you come out of it, you're like, oh, this is what I've done in my time. And it's just so, for me, like just so fulfilling. Even like, yeah, just like even like seeing like frames and stuff, like that's really exciting for me for some reason. So yeah, so that's kind of like why I want to like continue doing it. I just finished making a film after graduating, which was like a weird experience for me because it was commissioned, so like I had to like pitch my idea, and I felt like that was kind of like very impersonal because I was like, it's about me though, like I don't want you to like know why I'm making it, like just give me the money and I'll make it, like sort of thing. So I guess I'm still like working through that sort of like, am I gonna like for commission or whatever, but like I'm just always trying to, even if it's just like 5 seconds, you know what I mean, just try to take that time to like visualise something, make it move, and then like, oh, that was nice, that was like that little 5 seconds of self-care or whatever. So yeah.
Change how you think about time. So you have to spend a lot of time, and I think when I think about projects, if I'm going to do it in animation, it needs to be a project that I really, really am going to invest my time, my interest in. So that was part of the reason why I was attracted, because those stories weren't there. Well, I say they're not there, they are there, but they're not in particular spaces. And it was the idea of bringing those stories that I know about into spaces, but also to think about the physical space, so that you're grounded in gravity, and to use animation to challenge it or to bypass it. So the first film I made when I was at university was based on a book called The People Could Fly, which is a children's book. I can't remember the illustrators or the writer. I think it was the Hamiltons that illustrated it. And I think I got that book from a black bookstore. So there are all these things that I'm entering into spaces, I'm finding out information about worlds that I know that are there, but they're in particular spaces. And so animation allows me to operate in different spaces, and a story about people being able to fly is kind of perfect for an animation because it allows you to utilise the fact that it's not bound by gravity. So that was kind of key, finding a story that makes sense, a story that's not there but is there, and finding ways to kind of articulate that in a medium was the thing. And even before that, of seeing animation where you see the end result, you don't see the process. Mm-hmm. So behind all of this is a kind of a box that's out of the way, and you get to be in the box and you get to see what's behind it all. So that still is the thing that keeps me interested in it, because I know that there are boundless stories that I've heard over the years, that I have conversations with friends that we kind of talk about the time when, the time this, who, where, and it doesn't go outside of that because those stories aren't being told. So that's what still draws me in, and animation is a way of being able to do that.
Nice. Do you want to?
This one works. Yeah, I think my connection to animation is interesting, increasingly getting more distant, but it will I don't think it'll ever go away within my own practice, because I'm just obsessed with the infinite possibility it gives us a medium. And I don't know, I find myself drawn to, a lot of you have said similar, basically everything you've said encapsulates into my practice as well, but telling stories and combining that infinite possibility with infinite possibility of blackness, infinite possibility of myself, just seems like a natural connection to me. The only thing is, the distance for me is, how heavy as a process it takes to create work. So, but then there's an element of that process which I like, which is the hidden, that sort of sense of it's a proxy for you. You're not performing in that sense, even though you are through a drawing or a model or whatever. So for me, I find it quite interesting within my practice that performance is starting to meld its way more. Maybe, as I said, I come from a more commercial animation background, so Phoebe, when you were saying you were sick of animating someone's toe, I was just like, yes. And I was sick of working, advertising, I don't know, a car or toilet roll or something, and just honestly, and realised that this medium was so amazing for just creating your own universes in that sense, creating your own language. I think, in the kind of world we live in, capitalistic world of how art is treated, animation being such a slow medium does feel impractical in terms of the way we live and, how to make work, but I still think there's a magic there in that line, how you draw, how that line moves. Rhythm is so important. It seems to be such a unique way of creating that sense of movement. And I would love to know, if we lived in some sort of idealistic society where we didn't have all these constraints on our work as artists, how our relationship to animation would be. Would we be happy hiding away for 9 months creating this, Mothy, you were saying, this very meditative process of creating, and at times it is, but then how is it meditative in the society we live in?
Maybe we should make a pact to each other that we'll spend the next 9 months doing an animation.
I'd love to.
And refusal to captain.
Absolutely. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I agree with doing it.
I mean, imagine declaration. I think, and as animators as well, or people who not as solely as animators, but use animation as as part of your practice, you are, there's this level of control, godlike power, which is also a little bit seductive in a way. And maybe, I don't know, as black women, black non-binary people, there is that power. The animation, you control everything within the frame. So I don't know, maybe there's that element of taking back some sort of value and worth in that.
And also pushing things forward. It's world building.
Absolutely.
You can literally create any type of world.
I know.
Yeah, it's
We should be doing some more animation. We're talking about how I don't want to do it.
That we all collectively find out why it is that we started in the beginning. Because that's what drew us to it, that power of it. But knowing that it takes that time, and you kind of have to keep that in mind if you're allowed to be able to continue in that way. I mean, part of the reason why I use the loop a lot was because the loop becomes the way that you can at least extend, you can stretch your labour into maybe 4 or 5 times. And I'm finding similarities with computer-generated images that I'm able to at least extend their life a little bit more by tweaking stuff. And that's kind of why my interest is drawn more to computer-generated images. But having the opportunity to work with film this time has been incredible, because it's another way of sustaining that magic, because you are working in the dark, so to speak, that you have to trust what you're seeing and what you're feeling. And it's only when you get that box back and you open it up and you can at least see that there's something. Because nowadays when we're working digitally, a lot of us, so we kind of know, you know, we go along and we get to see, we get some feedback. But I think there's something kind of, you know, a bit of jeopardy when you just don't have that. You know, you have to shoot the whole 2.5 minutes. It goes off to processing, you have no idea. And there was something really extra magical in being able to do that. But then also for me to take it into a physical space. So being able to use the space in the gallery to say something else about that. So it's the material that I'm working with, but also it's the image that I've done. So, and I think animation allows you that. You know, if you're working with physical objects, you can then control how that's going to be. So you get to reorder. I mean, you get to change, you get to manipulate in a way that sometimes, like you were saying, Jess, that as black women in particular, you're kind of, I don't know, whatever impositions are made on you and restrict and constrain. In the world of animation, there is that ability to express in a way that kind of speaks back to that. So, yeah, but there are many things that kind of draw me back into it each time.
That's really incredible to hear everyone speak about the amount of labour involved in making an animation, which also deters me from ever making I will not be making an animation anytime soon. I mean, I'll try and probably, it won't get me so far, but my attention span. It's so interesting about this panel because, you know, there are a few times where I feel like everybody is connected, literally. So the fact that Phoebe, you had your exhibition in New Art Exchange not very long ago, Maybelle obviously also was here in Nottingham decades ago. And you know Panya and Michael, because Michael, who was in the audience, hi Michael Forbes, was in the audience. He was a student at RCA, Royal College of Art, and so was Jessica. So it's so interesting how a world is so small. And then Mothy and Jessica know each other.
Yeah, I taught Muffy.
Yeah.
See? Isn't that so interesting? And I'm interested about these relationships you form across generations and actually how we all end up sort of relating to each other and how we contextualized with each other. Because Jessica, you mentioned that you have done a panel discussion similar to this before, or conversation with the fellow panelists before in this context. So I'm interested in Maybelle, and maybe start with Maybelle and think about your encounters. Is when you studied animation, and you think about what you're making now, so you're interested in CGI, think about what you're making there. Do you feel like there has been progress? Do you feel like the conditions in which we learn as black people, as non-binary people, as black women are different? Do you feel like there's more of a support, a network of support, a structure of support when you're studying, but also then when you go out and you start to make work and you start to engage with the sector, be that animation or be that visual arts? But also, Maybelle, I know that you worked a lot on animation festivals, so this is sort of one of the few occasions where you get the opportunity to work in a gallery context. So also maybe reflect a bit on that early experience of working in that sort of animation context, and maybe reflect a little bit about why maybe you were pushed into potentially engaging in that context and not a visual arts context, not another context. So yeah, I want everyone to sort of reflect on those encounters and those networks and relationships and your experiences learning in your learning environments, if that's anything.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, what's interesting is Jessica didn't know that I did animation when I was working at the RCA, because I had stopped. I had decided that animation, the opportunities weren't there as they were. I was very fortunate when I was studying as a BA student that my first opportunity to make a a longer piece was a commission by BBC2. So I had the opportunity as a student to pitch, to get commissioned, and be thrown in the deep end, which was amazing, had incredible support, and that kind of stood me in good stead to continue making work. So I had like a run of making animated films and being introduced to the animation film festival circuit, which is very specific. I mean, it's a animation festival that, well, they're international, but being kind of introduced into a world where you make your work and it gets shown at a film festival was kind of different to making a commission piece that gets shown on television. So those are the doors that I see opening in how I make my work. And when I stopped, it was because I'd never really decided that I was going to go into the commercial field. I just didn't think that was where my work lay. I couldn't see me fitting into that way of working. I really wanted to experiment. But I didn't really know about opportunities to do things like residencies. I mean, I had no idea. I thought you make work, you show it at an animation festival, it gets shown on television, and that's it. So without other options, or you can make commercial work. So without any other spaces to go, I thought, well, I don't really know what else I want to do. So interestingly enough was after Jessica had left and you got that commission from, was it Animate?
Yeah, Animate Project.
And they said, go and speak to Maybelle. I'm like, so having a conversation about, you know, our experiences of entering those spaces of animation, film festivals where you normally are in the minority, and it's a huge minority. I mean, it's not even, if you manage to see a couple of people, then you might think, oh, there's an opportunity. But it's not just the fact that it's animation. There are specific things, like we're having a conversation this evening about where our interests overlap. And it's kind of collectively kind of thinking about why we're interested in animation, which I didn't have when I was studying. I didn't have those conversations, and that was what was missing. To think about, there's some kind of future in this, there's a way that we can feed off each other and think about what are the specifics, the particularities, like you were saying, Jade, the convergences and the divergences. We're not even having those conversations, so I don't even know where we can converge or diverge and how we can kind of build something, nor do I know where we can go to find opportunities outside of that. So it was limited. And then having the opportunity to be involved in Jessica's work and then having that talk with Phoebe, it kind of like, oh, that there are these connections that allow us to still know that there are these possibilities, and that's something, hopefully, that continues, that we now see that there are many more people that are involved in animation in different fields. We have the internet, so you know the fact that it's being broadcast, live streamed, allows people internationally to see that actually there are people that I hadn't never even heard of, or maybe I don't even know where to go and see their work. So I think it's more positive in that regard.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, even in education sort of worlds, it still feels quite sort of disparate. I definitely see, as like an educator, I teach at Goldsmiths and run workshops at galleries. I see young women of colour, young black women, young non-binary people coming through with this interest, and then when it comes to graduating and being in that sort of world, the disconnect happens in that sense. But even once we get into that, I mean, what you just said there, Maybelle, about not knowing where to go, I still had that upon graduating with RCA, because I was thinking, well, where I have my interest in my work, I guess commercial is the only way I can go, but I don't want to, even from the start I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm kind of like a craftsperson for hire in that sense, and I have these stories I want to tell, but I had no sort of frame of reference to what that can be. And really it was within, and I think why I ended up kind of pivoting more towards a visual arts landscape is that I was at least seeing women of colour, like my contemporaries, like black women creating and thinking, okay, I can connect with them in terms of the stories they want to tell, which are similar to ideas I want to share, or even just, you know, that sort of, like a kind of deep sense of relief of being in these spaces. So, and within, you know, in an explicitly animation context, that doesn't really exist at all, apart from the random people like me at film festivals. And even within, like, film festivals, as you said, Maybelle, it's a really specific space and language, and it's all to do with style and trends. And again, if you know, don't fit into that mold in many ways, there isn't really that kind of connection. So it's, yeah, these moments, which don't happen nearly enough, of convening, essentially, and communing, is where I find an element of solace. But there isn't, I don't know, there isn't enough of that sort of connection, and it's thinking, where do you go with that? Like the symposium you went to, Phoebe, in Venice, I forget what it's called.
The Olive Retreat.
Yes, that kind of energy, watching that from afar, online, being like, what? Like that, and it doesn't have to happen in explicitly animation context, but just that sense of, commune, I think, would also kind of probably trickle down to more of an educational kind of purposes. And also, you know, working in any types of institution, in the institutional context, there are parameters anyway. So you're not only working against, you know, the parameters that the world is telling you to put on yourself. There's arts education, and you know, we were talking about your MA, and like, you know, and just like dealing with art history in that sort of sense. So I still feel like there is this scrabbling around, and I think it's better when I did my undergrad, which was animation, many years ago, I didn't see anyone like me in that sort of sense, and I just kind of was swept with the wave of what you meant to do as an animator. Didn't know about using animation in the visual arts context, any of that, and I wasn't getting that from my tutors or that sort of thing, and even, you know, in RCA, and not knowing your history and that sort of sense. So I don't know, I think just having those regular moments to talk and to discuss, and kind of, you know, historically as well, you know, there's a lot of, I've got a lot of hope for the future for up-and-coming and emerging artists, but it's like knowing your history, I suppose, to move forward in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you. I would say, well, so I graduated last year, and I would say, obviously, like, you've got the whole, like, Black Lives Matter movement, and, like, all of these stories that are being, like, sort of, like, turned over, and, like, so when, I guess, like, in that sort of sense of, like, graduating and not feeling like there was any, do you know what I mean? I had Jess, who was my teacher, so in that sense, I felt so lucky to be like, oh, well, Jess is there, and she's doing that, so, like, I could do that, do you know what I mean?
There's like a bad person in my group.
Yeah, this is, and I felt that, and, like, I really, really appreciate that.
But don't also.
Yeah, no. So I would say, like, and, like, there's loads of, like, you can get into it, but, like, loads of, like, diversity hires that happen right now, and, like, loads of, like, quote opportunities where we can be put in the space, but it's maybe not, do you know what I mean? Maybe it's not as pure as it seems, but it's still, so those doors are, like, there, I guess. So with my commission, it was like, we need black animators. It was like one of those ones. And I thought, well, let me go do that.
Who commissioned you, sorry?
So it was Film London that commissioned me, yeah.
Lemon.
That's the one. So they were like, we need black animators, and I, do you know what I mean, just graduated. I was like, yeah, I've got to apply, like, that. And to be put in that space and know that there was, like, 3 other black animators animating at the same time as me, like, with the same goal, that did really push me. So, like, and I'm not saying, like, it's amazing or it's, like, better, do you know what I mean? It's just that, because that's just 4 of us at the end of the day, but, like, I did feel this sort of, like, oh, okay, like, doors are open, doors are being pushed ajar a bit or whatever. So with my sort of space, I've never thought, like I guess like the same pressures of, oh yeah, let me go into commercially doing that. I feel like I've been quite blessed really to have like a black tutor, because you just don't really have people that look like you doing like what you want to do like ever, do you know what I mean? That I kind of felt like, oh well, that can stay my passion, or like I don't need to make money off of that. So I do have like a day job. Sorry, sold my soul. Yeah, I do have a day job.
This economy.
Yeah, you have to, right? And like in that day job, do you know, I don't see myself. You know, I don't see people that look like me. But like these kinds of spaces are really refreshing, and like, I guess yeah, it's just kind of like trying to push that whole like we are here and we're loud and proud and we're doing it, and yeah, just like even just looking at your work, like from getting asked to do this was like absolutely amazing, because you know you just never, you know what I mean, you never see, I guess like people that are older than you that have been doing it, do you know what I mean, like you're not made aware of that, and like that history isn't there, and like to be in this space and like to be with that history, to be with the present, to be with like the future is like so uplifting. And I guess that's like kind of like how, yeah, well with what I do, I kind of just try to keep that going, like yeah, just stay with you, Jess. Any person I'm like what do you want to do, like you want to do that with me, like let's try and make it move, and sort of that kind of yeah flow. Yeah. Do you want to say something?
I mean, I think everything's Hi. No, I don't think there's one person from like my kind of age of oldness who has a positive story really about art school. I think or at least everyone has a story about somehow being derailed by something obscene and kind of ridiculous that happened to them to do with their subjectivity within art school, and so I'm so like I just think it's so great that that's changing. I think, and yeah, I have some no yeah
No,
No,
I was
no.
just gonna say. I was just going to say about the one thing I would say about art school that is a positive thing, you know, is not art school itself, because I met my mentor when I was 16, and then I invited, my mentor was Marnie Smith, and then I also invited Vanny Burke and Marnie Smith to come and do a tutorial with me. Now, yes, the institution is violent, but what it pushes you to do is to seek support out of the institution, to know there's a place of network and peer support outside the institution, to know that you can't get everything from the institution. And that's a really important lesson, which I don't think if you don't, you know, if you feel like you're getting everything from one space, you never seek anything else outside of that, and you sort of then miss this whole world that you didn't know. And you know, when people graduate, they become clueless that actually there's so much different pockets of things going on, different levels of activity, levels of, you know, spaces which you can function in, all plurally. And there's actually this generosity of like, yeah, I can do that there, I can be experimental there, I can dip my toes in there. There's a space for me in these outskirts, but also potentially within the mainstream. It's just sort of like maybe a sort of not necessarily visible to you straight away, but there are loads of incredible projects that are going on, like, you know, and making histories visible by the Bain Himid, for example, Christine Ayin, which is all about this idea of revealing all of the scholarly, all of the actual what's there, you know, in these spaces with, you know, black lecturers that are making things happen for other students, that are creating those spaces, those reading groups, those opportunities for critical dialogue, you know. So I think it's a thing of, I think it's a two-sided coin, you know. It's a sort of invisibility and also visibility going on. And I guess sometimes when you're on that side of invisibility, that it's really hard to see what is visible sometimes, even from your own subjectivity. So I think I just wanted to add that. Sort of like, I also had a two-sided experience. One experience where actually I discovered the British Black Arts movement when I was at university by force, because I had to discover that space where my voice could be fit. You know, so thankfully, actually, I don't, you know, if I felt complacent, maybe I wouldn't have discovered that. There's a sort of weird thing going on, you know?
Can I tell you something? I think I was telling you this at Brixton the other day. But you talked about Marlene Smith, and I did a panel with her at the Tate for Frank Bowling's show, his very long overdue retrospective, and the talk was about letters to Frank Bowling, and we all had to write a letter to Frank Bowling, and it was inspired because Marlene Smith, at the age of I think 17, wrote Frank Bowling a letter. And said in this letter, "Dear Frank Bowling, I'm Marlene Smith, I'm 17, I'm an artist, and I haven't seen anyone who looks like me until I found you. And so I'm writing my, I don't know, like O-level paper on you, and I'm very excited because finding you has made me realize that I can change the world and everything's going to be amazing, and you know, we're going to move into this new space. And so what I need from you is I need you to send me this slide, this slide, this slide, and this slide, because it was still when like we used slides. We need to send you these slides, and I'm on a deadline." She's 17, writing to Frank Bowling. She's like, "I'm on a deadline. You need to send me these by this date. Here's my like physical address." And Frank Bowling sent the things, and then he also kept the letter. So when his retrospective came, and he has a great team in his studio, and they found this letter, so they invited Marlene back to write a new letter, to firstly read her letter, because now obviously she is an important artist, and Frank Bowling is a very revered artist. So she read her letter from being 17, and then she wrote him a new letter, and it was so poignant because her 17-year-old letter was dripping with enthusiasm and energy and hope and all of these things. And then in her new letter, she was like, you know, regardless of how much I've done, I still feel weird in rooms. I still feel, you know, like I think back about that young girl, and it hasn't been fulfilled yet, and we still need to do the fulfilling. And it was just very. So yeah, I just wanted to tell you that little anecdote.
It's really quite sad. But also like it's quite galvanizing in the sense that, yeah, a bit of a weird thing, like she's still in that place now.
Yeah, still acknowledging that there's more to do.
Yeah. Mother of all our mothers.
Yeah.
I would say. But. Stuck. Thank you. So, thank you all for contributing to that. So I've got an individual question for Phoebe, because I'm also jealous, like Jessica and Maybelle, that you went to Venice. And I'm like, put me in the suitcase. But we went to Venice, and you obviously were around incredible black people in that. And I remember you saying it was just so beautiful it was a moment, you know, being in that space. And I want to know what was your learning from that space, which you can share with us today, in terms of what happens when you get together a cohort of black women, a cohort of black scholarly and thinking, and what magic can happen.
Everything can happen in that space, right? So Loophole, for people who don't know, Loophole of Retreat it's a convening organized by Simone Lee, Saidia Hartman, Tina Camp, and Rashida Bumbre. And it happened in Venice to coincide with Simone Lee, who is representing America at the Venice Biennale. And they
as part of her show, they created this incredible convening where they invited all of these scholars and thinkers and artists and performers, all black women and non-binary people, to be present, to share. So it was a 3-day thing on this Chini island, like just off main Venice, and then it was 700 mainly women in the audience, free, completely free if you could get there and if you could get on the waiting list, because it's sold out. Well, the invitations went in like 5 seconds. But it was, firstly, I think what was incredible about it was just firstly seeing Venice, this place that's, you know, like so touristy and so plastic in a way, and it's beautiful and incredible, and it's one of the most amazing places in the world, but it's also a complete fantasy world. And then seeing it completely inundated by black women, like, and everyone was all, you know, just so in love with each other, like from the beginning. And it was really well organized, so we'd just take these boats and be always on the water, and then just to hear everyone and hear what they've decided in this important gathering, this kind of gathering that's probably never going to happen the same way in our lifetimes, maybe, I don't know, what they decide to share in that moment, and just the variety of sharing, and the realization that even though we have such bonds and we're so kind of divinely bonded, we're not at all a monolith. We all have completely our own language that we speak in. We have we have like a kind of ancestral knowledge, I guess, but we also have a wide variety of ancestors, and we have a wide variety of imagined futures, and I think that was the main thing, and then obviously what happens once those bonds are formalized and how we move them forward. And so I think everyone who was there was like forever changed by that moment, and I think there'll be offshoots that happen.
That's beautiful. And you know what I really envy about African American scholarly is they have such a camaraderie, you know, which I don't think is necessarily translates in the British context. So in that way, you know, we don't really have lots of opportunity to have those moments in our context. You know, we went to something together where I felt like there was a real moment of coming together and having this photograph taken, which has commemorated 40 years since the Black Art Group and since the Black British Arts Movement sort of galvanised a whole generation of thinkers, of artists, of culture producers, of curators, which was incredibly important. But I want to question the whole panel. It's a two-part question, and it's a good reason why I asked you what your thoughts were about imagined futures, about how can we formalise. Hello? Yeah. How can we formalise these moments? How can we formalise support and network? What do you imagine the future to be? You were talking about Marlene Smith's letter. How do we get there? What do we need to offer each other? What does the sector need to offer us?
Maybelle, you go first.
Time and space, and the support network that allows for time and space to be concrete, rather than, well, if we, you know, find an opportunity to bring you together in another panel discussion, then yes, we discuss, but then afterwards, then how do we find ways to make work, to discuss what we read. I mean, what's really interesting is that I've kind of returned to animation and I'm doing my PhD by practice, and having the time to read and engage with all of those things that I didn't engage with before has been key. I've had the time, I've had the space. It would be really good for me to find opportunities to talk about what I found and what I haven't found, and other people to talk about what they found and what they do and how they do it. And for it to be something that is concrete, that allows that to be taken forward, rather than, wouldn't it be good if? Because yes, it would be good, but it has to be right. What can we do, and who can help us? So it's almost like a business plan that we have, that we say, well, what's missing? Well, the space. Well, we can convene over the internet. That's fine. But you know, even us tonight having a conversation and talking about, wouldn't it be great if 9 months later? I actually think, who do we need to contact to say, could you give us the time and the space for us to come back in 9 months' time with what we're working on and what we do, rather than, well, you know, it's not going to happen. I think I'm kind of putting it out there for someone to respond and say, can you give us time and space for us to come back in 9 months' time to actually make some stuff? Yeah. And I would be really interested if there's somebody that does truly respond and say, no, we can do it. Because I think there's probably someone that can say, yeah, we can do it.
I think I'm going to have something to say.
I
think also, though, it's tricky because, again, my connection to the institution and all the institutions is so frayed and non-existent in that sense, because we can't get answers from them. They're never going to help us in terms of what our imagined futures are, what our goals in that sense. And for me, a sort of element of emancipation, I guess, in my practice was connecting to like the punk rock scene. Not saying that everyone has to become punk rock, that kind of thing. And DIY ways and grassroots ways of like collectivizing. And I think it's honestly down to ourselves, and even something as simple as contacting, like keeping that connection alive, that even as simple as hellos, meeting for coffees, like organising events together. It's tricky because, you know, we have to get funding from institutions and from these bodies who, you know, control the landscape of the visual arts in that sense. But I truly don't think there is that support there for us, and it makes me, you know, we all play this like ballet of funding applications and whatever, or that kind of thing of trying to get our work to exist and to be acknowledged in our own right. And part of me wants to hide away and just, you know, make my little things and just, you know, there's something for some handful of people to see and whatever. But I really think there's something in galvanizing together. You know, the project where I was interviewing you, Phoebe, and you, Maybelle, was all just through having to do that ballet of like Arts Council funding and all that kind of stuff. But that gave me so much nourishment from talking to you formally in that sort of sense. And whilst that's not an exact, you know, way to go in terms of those sort of projects, but that way of just, I feel like it is up to us in that way. So those ideas we have, it's like keeping those connections alive. I suppose Loophole Retreat was essentially a way of formalising that, you know. These are artists who want people to commune together. So it's harder work because, again, once again, it's down to us. But I can't really see any other way of how the institutions aren't going to help us.
But why not?
Because I don't.
Surely the institutions would benefit
on their terms, and for how long? It's a flash in the pan. Like, you know, we're seeing things like, yeah, Frank Bowling having his first like institutional show for like retrospective ever. Like, why has that happened? Why are you having your first solo show now? Like, you know, not first, but like, these are the questions I ask where we should be canon in that way. Yeah. Some of us are, but you know, it's like that for me, I truly have, maybe I don't know, I've also had a lot of like institution support, like connections with the Tate at the moment, and it's really like finding the rooftop, like there's a restriction on where you can go with your ideas and your creativity and your imagination, and it has to be on their terms. So if we keep playing that game, where is that gonna, where will that be for us? Where will we end? You know? I don't know. The institutions are there to help us, but I can't see, it just seems like the same patterns are playing out. And how do you break that cycle?
Say no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love saying no.
I was going to call back on what you said, Jade, about like how it feels like Black American culture is so like, and then like here we kind of have like, we do kind of have like separations, and what I wanted to like comment on is like how, like for me growing up, like I was like, am I British or am I Ugandan? Do you know what I mean? But like, yeah, I'm Ugandan. Do you know what I mean? So like I feel like there is definitely that whole, of course it's like super sad that like lots of African Americans don't know where they're from, but they do have that whole I'm African American, and they kind of like ride through that. And I feel like here there's so many, like, do you know what I mean, like most of us are from diaspora, do you know what I mean, the Windrush, like loads of us are from still suffering with that trauma of like generational trauma that's happened to us quite recently, and we're still being affected by it now, in the sense of like we don't know if we're British or not. So when we're taking their funding and when we're like asking for these opportunities, it's still an ask. Whereas like you're seeing like this movement in America where they're taking things because they know that that's, you know, no, this is our space. And I feel like what's happening now with like obviously like all of the uprisings and beautiful uprisings, is that we're kind of understanding that like this is as much of our space as it is anyone else's space. Like we have contributed the same amount, or even more, not even the same amount, I'm going to say more, but then for the, do you know what I mean, edit that out and then put the same amount of doubly. I'd say that we're finally understanding that we are so influential to British culture, like in terms of like their, just like everything, like we're so influential, and I feel like that's a very new thing. Like I have lots of friends who are, so I'm quite young, I'm not super young anymore, but I'm quite young, and like I do have a lot of friends who we do struggle with, like, do you know what I mean, like are we going to go back, like do we stay here sort of thing. And I feel like that's where we kind of struggle with banding together as like as a people, and also like just firming our space. So I do feel like that time is coming. Like I do feel like we're beginning to understand that we're putting in, so we need to take out. And I feel like it's also, yeah, as you said, it's important to say no. Like with the Flaming Commission thing, I was like speaking to a panel of like white people, and they had no clue what I was talking about, and I just didn't care. I was like, I don't care if you don't know what I'm talking about. And I think that they were like, oh, well, we kind of have to give you that because we don't even know what we talk about, so it could be valid. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I feel like we're starting to be able to like push for this space of like, it doesn't matter, like give us the money, but like also we deserve the money. Like we're as much artists as anyone else. Like it shouldn't be retrospective. Do you know what I mean? Like we're here now, and we're doing the things that we need to do in order to like build that sort of community. And I feel like, yeah, spaces like this, like, thank you so much, you know what I mean, spaces like this is so important. It's like kind of like what keeps you going. And then it's just like, even like me telling like my white friends, like, yeah, I'm going to like, we're all black people, we're going to talk about animating, like they're like, what, that's crazy. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? So like I feel like we're making those steps, and those steps are happening, and it's just about standing our ground and like not feeling like, oh, like what if they don't understand that? It doesn't matter. Like, do you know what I mean? It's not for them, and that's like every time I make art, like if someone doesn't like it, doesn't understand it, I just say, babes, it's not for you. Do you know what I mean? Like this is not your space. Like and someone will find that, and like someone will fill that space, and that's probably like what's the most important thing, I think. Yeah. So I rambled a bit there.
No, but you said what actually is important about space and space and holding that space.
Yeah, I think it's the holding, because like for me, like oh God, I love protest, I do. Holding the space, like, okay, we've occupied the space, but how are we gonna, like, every time like we make art, like it is protest, like it's not what is mainstream or commercial, like that's not like what art looks like. For me, like even like as a kid, like I would watch Boondocks and I'd be like, that is a world where basically everyone is black. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that's crazy. Like that's what animation does for me, and like I think that is so important that it's like acknowledge, and then also like within ourselves, like we acknowledge that we are occupying the space and like we just need to stay. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm having problems with mics today, apparently. Thank you. I just want to say that what's important, I think, how I imagine the future is us writing ourselves in that history, but also getting our allies. It's so important, allyship, personally. Like, you know, we are an extended community of different practitioners, you know, we identify in different ways, we have an intersection of this, you know. So I think also going back to the beginning of the conversation around the different forms of practice that you guys have, and it's like the different ways you could be referenced, different ways you could be like your practices are drawn on, like different connections which you can make in these different contexts, in the things you're doing and what you're doing with the medium of drawing, firstly. And then, you know, working with how do you make a body move in a space? How do you make that limitless? How are you, you know, redefining, reimagining, relooking, rethinking, and using animation to do that as a tool to explore some ideas which allows you to work through some of those sort of ideas around. I think there's something really interesting about, you know, art historians, curators, people who watch animation, people who engage with the arts and culture, people who are funders, who are institutions, all having a part to play. And I think that it's sort of this ecosystem. And, you know, as a curator and as a trainee art historian, I'm not very good at it, but as a trainee art historian, you know, it's important for me these talks are recorded, and so people can look back and be like, oh, I found that little bit of insight Phoebe saying about loophole retreat. I found that bit of insight about Maybelle speaking about the boundlessness and weightlessness of animation, about making bodies move, the liberation and emancipation that comes with that, you know. So that's the history, you know. We're making the history to be referenced in the future. So for me, this is what it is. It's having these moments of recorded, documented narrative, documented stories in letter form, in writing, in spoken, you know, word, and whatever it is that you use to document with, but having that sort of archive, that sort of growing archive of knowledge, which is accessible to people to use. And I think for me, that's the future. Having more of that, more of these opportunities to create an archive of Black thought, which can be referenced by everybody in learning, in education, lecturers included, teachers included, you know, so everyone can benefit from our knowledge and use that, and also feel that they're seen within the stuff that is being made, basically, the histories that are being made. So for me, that's what I see, anyways, as important, what we can do to further on this plight. But did you want to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think that it's completely to do with care and authenticity, which I think is kind of, it compounds everything. But I think it's the care that we have for each other, like literally just showing up to each other's stuff, like actually giving a shit and not just kind of, you know, I think there's that, and then I think there's also Black philanthropy. Like, I don't think we should always have to beg people for money so that we can make the thing that then we have to kind of distort a little bit so it fits within their guidelines. Like, I think the thing that happens in America is there's a lot of Black philanthropy and there's a lot of for us, by us, and that doesn't happen here. And there is money here. It's not that there's no money. It's just that there's the connective tissue isn't there, and the belief that it's an important thing to do isn't there. And I don't know. I'm thinking about there's this project that's currently running now, the World Reimagined project. It's like these globes, these black globes. They're not black globes. Mine isn't. It's called black globe. That's what I'm saying. But there are these globes that it was meant to be this public work, this public trail of works where artists are invited to help people understand Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade, right? So said yes. These things don't happen that much in Britain. So he said yes. And then it turned out, and I genuinely thought that it was a for us, by us thing. Then turns out that it's completely sponsored by big banks, and not just that, because I think big banks should sponsor such things quietly. They're covering the globes with their branding. And so it becomes a corporate sponsored project about trauma and black pain and black emancipation, and when you I don't know, when you really deep what that is,
It's cynical.
It's so wild to me. Anyway, it's nearly over. I don't want to say too much because if I begin to speak. But yeah, I think that to me is a really obvious version of what happens anyway in any kind of transactional situation where your work is being transacted, and that needs to change before we really can start to make what we need to make.
So, I want to go to questions in the audience or online. I hope everyone has been following us and you're still with us online. But I know dinner time and all of that, trust me, food, good, I know. But just hang on with us, we're almost there at the finishing line. So, yeah, that's what happens, guys. I get a little quirky at the end of a talk. So, does anyone have any questions for the panel? Yeah, sure.
It's probably it's quite early on in the conversation you all talked about time, and so clearly there is an animation industry which is generating a lot of money. So is money linked to time for you guys, as in you don't want to commit the time because you need to generate income elsewhere, or?
Yeah. I think animation is animation is really expensive because it's so time consuming, and say, when I did work commercial, if you're charging your day rate for 6 months, it's a lot of money. So usually there isn't the budget there to allow you the time. So there is, whilst it is a very process heavy medium, you're still doing it within a small time constraint a lot of the time. So, or you're doing it you have a long time available, but it's at the cost of the amount you're getting paid. So, you're taking a kind of cut to what you need to survive in that sense. So, I suppose there's a similarity with a lot of our practices of trying to find that middle ground, I guess, where we sit and with where our ideas and the development as well, and the process of our ideas, as well as the physical making of it and what that means, living in a society where you've got to pay your bills and all that sort of stuff. So unless anybody wants to
We've got a question
I was just going to say that is the main thing about having the time to do it, and one of the reasons why I thought about a personal archive was that actually there's a lot of accrued material that hasn't been used. So I'm trying to think about the relevance of a lot of material that might actually kind of contribute to a new piece of work, because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get used for various reasons, whether it's, you know, the project isn't right, or somebody says it's not kind of what they're looking for. So you spend a lot of time doing some R&D, and it might not be right for that project, but it might be right for something that you're doing. So I'm interested in how an archive can be utilised.
I have a really, like, this is just a personal little stupid thing, but I have a really hard time not touching every aspect of my work. So if I do an animation and I have an assistant, for example, who does the in-betweens, I know that I haven't touched every millisecond of the thing, so I go back over it all. Yeah, it just makes no sense. It has to be really important that it has to be in that medium in order for it to take over life in that regard.
There's a question coming in on the YouTube chat from Charlie Dolan, who's asking, which I think touches on some of the things you said as well, how do you find balancing a day job with a creative freelance job?
Hello? Okay. Yeah. I feel like it becomes like a lot of sacrifice. I feel like sometimes I'm like sacrificing, say, like an extremely crazy social life that I should be having in my 20s because I want to do art and things like that. So it is one of those like and I also found it a lot easier to do art when I kind of had like a very like mundane day job. Like I was working all through uni. Do you know what I mean? Didn't sleep. I don't know if it was like, do you know, like the young juice? I think maybe I've just like, lost it. I don't know. But I had like quite a mundane like day job. Like worked all through uni and then still kind of found time to like do my own art on the side. And now I've got like, I guess like an adult job. It is becoming difficult, and I feel like it is a lot of sacrifice. And I guess like as like times have changed as well, like the sacrifice that you see that like draws us to art is also changing. And like maybe it is like you don't have, well, yeah, maybe it's like you don't have as much money as you like would like to do things, or even need, I'd say. And I feel like that's also difficult when you're like, because I'm like a black animator and I know that those spaces aren't being funded, but I still want to animate, and like sort of like trying to like balance that whole like, yeah, like sort of like sacrificial space, I guess, is very like, very difficult. I always just say, like even like the tiniest thing towards your like art is productive. Like even if it's like 30 minutes and you've just like looked at the page, you know what I mean? Like you are still contributing towards like your goal and your end. And because things change so much, like I'll do something and I'll be like halfway through and I'm like, no, I just want to change it all. Like, do you know what I mean? Like I do want to, and I feel like although it's like you do kind of want to see the immediate outcome, like having that time is good for the development of your art. Like it's never a bad thing, like taking a long time to do things. Although obviously, yeah, you do want the money, but sometimes, yeah, you just gotta grind, I guess. Yeah, it's difficult, but I think it's like important to give yourself that time for your art, like, and also, do you know what I mean? Like, look after yourself. Do have a job. So, you, like, if you're able to have a job, like, do that so that you can support yourself. But yeah, it's just always about like whatever you need in that space and time. Then put that first. Like, it's sometimes you don't need the money, you know, or sometimes you don't need to be doing art, and it's always like just trying to find those little pockets of time where you can like balance those things.
Michael?
So obviously gaming is really big nowadays, so is there any crossover or in terms of your practices with gaming and animation for gaming?
I'm kind of... I am interested in that idea. I am interested in that idea of introducing gaming because I think it offers a lot in terms of negotiating spaces and thinking how that can be carried from experiences and imagined futures. I think there's a whole wealth of unexplored stories in there, or even to subvert it with the animation. I mean, a lot of these disciplines, like with games design, comes from a very particular knowledge set of what gaming is, and gets taught and gets produced. And I think there's a huge realm of exploring how that could be upended, and I would love to. I mean, I did do programming. I don't have the patience, but I think there was something in that idea of programming, and I know that there are some communities of black programmers and computer scientists that are interested in that area, and AI and ethics. I mean, there's a whole branch of research, and I think there probably are some outliers, particularly with like public source code that they are interested in using and making available to communities. So there are communities that are working that way. Whether it needs like a branch of creative practitioners to work with the programmers to start to do some really interesting stuff. I think there really is some scope there, and there probably are people that say, look, I've been doing that for like 20 years, what are you talking about? But it would be good to hear from people that are doing that, and that's another area of how we can come together and do some really interesting stuff.
Hello. So not gaming per se, but during the pandemic, I was called by these people who wanted, because we weren't able to go out and see art, they were making this art museum virtual, and they were collaborating with all these gamers, and it was going to be this amazing thing, and they invited me to do the first virtual residency in this space, and they were like, it's going to be great, you can work with the gamers, you can work with all these technicians. And I was like, this is going to be amazing, because we've now become so used to this kind of virtual landscape, and we're becoming used to kind of moving through this virtual realm, right? So, and we miss the outside world and whatever. And and I thought this could be an incredible opportunity to make the installations that, for whatever reason, to do with economics, not having the funding, or even gravity, like just simply cannot work in the real world. So I said yes, and they hadn't built it yet. And so then they said, okay, we'll get back to you when we've built it. So they got back to me, and they said, okay, come, we'll do a walk through the space. So we virtually met in this space. And it was like the tape, like it looked like any other thing. Oh my gosh. And they've done it incredibly. I mean, you could see the shafts of light falling through the light things, the type of marble, the type of that concrete shiny thing. Like everything was exactly as one of those spaces are. And these are spaces that don't ever make us feel welcome. So I was like, I miss this. Like I miss my friends, I miss touch, but I don't miss the tape. I'm sorry.
But you've got infinite possibility.
And it was such a funny thing, because then they So we're going through, and you have to kind of navigate it, and we're still a bit clunky and whatever. So you're navigating the thing, you get to gallery 1, main gallery. Obviously the technicians are not curators, so they just got some stock art. So it was all like dead white men on the wall, just to show what it looks like with art on the wall. So you're still walking through, you're like, okay, so they're the dead white men, we get it, like this is exactly the same. Then you have to walk up all these staircases, you're bumping into walls. I'm like, why are there walls in a virtual space? And then we finally get to my place where I'm doing the residency, right? And it's called an annex. I'm like, how do you have a building that doesn't exist and you've annexed it to put me, the black woman, in to have my residency?
Why am I the marginalised
Why have you made an add-on of a place that doesn't exist? So at first I was like, I absolutely don't want to do this. And then I thought more about it, and I thought, again, like, what is the thing I can do here that I cannot do at the Tate? And I was like, the thing I can do here that I can't do at the Tate is burn the fucking thing down. So I ended up working with this incredible gamer. He must be about 5 years old. You know, they're so young. And he's so great. And he's so interested in particles and all this stuff. And we burned the place we burned the annex down. Yeah, we burned this annex down.
I love that.
And it's incredible how he does it, and all the beams are falling on. It's so cool. And then I'm like, okay, so, but then what? Like, we burn it down, and then what? And I think this is what I think about in terms of any of these institutions. We burn it down, and then what? Like, what exists afterwards? What do we build afterwards? So then I created, from the ashes, this figure arises, this woman rises from the ashes, and she walks, because in this building is placed in this kind of mythical world, and it's all pastoral and whatever, and there's forests and whatever, and there's this lake. So I create this woman who rises from the ashes, and she walks to the lake, and she walks into the lake, and then she combusts, and she makes sediment in the lake. So over the course of the day, this sediment grows and grows and grows to the point that it's created its own island, and that island is where we are. And that was, in a sense, what I want to do in real life. Like, I want to burn it down, and then I'm going to create an island out of the ashes of the burning down. So yeah, that was, in the end, it wasn't realized because funding, they couldn't fund the final bit, so we never finished this project, but we got to the point where she was standing at the water, and I think that's kind of symbolic.
Sure. I do think it's like super interesting how you went into that gaming space, or that virtual space, and still felt like the societal pressure that we feel in our spaces. And I do feel like it is one of those things like, oh yeah, like I can go into gaming, or like all that's like, do you know what I mean, trying to find your space. But I think that it's more about us not only just creating our own spaces, but like also like being able to be in our spaces and not necessarily feeling like, oh, I'm not making enough money, like maybe I'll go into gaming, because the gaming industry is worse than the film industry, and I don't even want to know what it's like for people of colour, like people in minority groups. So I feel like there's still so much work that can be said within our art that will get us to those spaces at one point if we want to be there, but I don't feel like there's ever like a good compromise in terms of like, you know what I mean, trying to be successful, or like trying to not even be successful, just financially successful, like through animating. Like, yeah, we know it's like, I feel like it's in itself a process, and like it's so symbolic, but then it's so like real, like it's so that there's so that process is like in all of the sort of like strains of it all. Maybe gaming wouldn't be the best step forward, like for me anyway. I don't want to speak for everyone.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone That was a pause. I was like, why was a pause then? For comedic effect. Just told you guys I get quirky at the end of the talk. So thank you everybody for all your contribution. It's generally been a pleasure to listen to Phoebe Boswell say, I want to burn the tape down. I'm joking. I am joking. The tape, it's okay. It's alright. We're not coming for you, don't worry. That is a joke. So, you know why I love panel talks? All sorts of stuff happens in a panel talk. The unknowability of a panel talk is what gets me. It's really exciting, isn't it? No, but thank you everybody for all your contributions. I've learned so much from you all today about the intersection of your practice and where you're at and what your experiences are. And just thank you for sharing and for being really generous with that. And thank you for everybody who's listened and spent their evening with us, just going through this journey and dotting all of those intersections and the specificities of each person's experience. Thanks for the audience, the live audience, guys, and for Michael's questions. Thank you for that. And thank you for the person online as well for your questions. So I just want to say it's been a ride. And you need to go and see Maybelle Peters' exhibition at Primary, which is still open, still on, and will be on till, Rebecca, please remind me of the date. 26th of November. So if you're in Nottingham, please do come. It's a fantastic exhibition, alongside Matt Collins' exhibition as well, which is in the reading room. And yeah, just thank you guys and have a great evening.
Thank you.